Hello, everyone. Hello, linguists. How are you doing? Welcome to Tuesday's episode. How was your weekend? I hope that you had a great weekend. Last week was my birthday. I turned 37 years old and it was awesome. And I am very excited because we had awesome guests last week and we continue to have great guests this week. Today we have instructor Marco Hanson. He's a master licensed Kurd interpreter. He is an American Translators Association certified Spanish English translator, Master of Arts, Spanish bilingual education, 20 years of interpreting experience, present Austin Area Translators and Interpreters Association, past president of the Texas Association of Judiciary Interpreters and Translators, and the co-owner of Texan Translation. Hello, Marco. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Pamela. It's nice to be here. This is my first podcast, so go easy on me.
I love. Okay, there, we're good. Um, how are you doing? How have you been? Tell us. Well, first, I should say that I started knowing about Marco through Facebook. There's this page on Facebook that I suggest everyone in Texas follows. It's called the Become a Texas Kurd Interpreter. And Marco had a really nice group there where he would encourage interpreters that were interested in becoming legal interpreters or Kurd interpreters in Texas to take the exam, visit courtrooms. So tell us now a little bit about yourself.
All right. Well, I live in Austin. I've been here for, I guess 14 years now, but I'm from Brownsville, down on the Texas border, near Matamoros, Mexico. And I'm married with 4 kids. Two of them go to college out of state, but they're back ever since the end of March. They've been back, and so we've all been cooped up at home together, but we're having fun. And we are able to get out, even with some of the restrictions that we still have in Austin. We're getting out, and we went to Lake Travis yesterday, and it was beautiful weather, and we did some floating out on the lake. And my kids are all studying languages too, and so we have like words of the day in different foreign languages that we're putting up, and we practice over the dinner table. And it's languages are sort of our family hobby, our family tradition. We all geek out over foreign languages.
That is so cool. I love that. We'll go back to that. I love languages, so yeah, I'm definitely gonna go back to that.
All right.
Um, Tell us a little bit about how did you start?
Okay. I've noticed that interpreters and translators, at least in the United States, we tend to follow a real meandering path to get to this career field. Almost all of us went to college for something else and then just sort of stumbled into translation or interpretation. And that was my case. I grew up on the border in a neighborhood where everybody spoke Spanish except for my family. My father was bilingual. My parents had been missionaries to Mexico before I was born, and my father's Spanish was real good, and he used that as he was a teacher. My parents were both teachers there in high school, and so I heard Spanish, but I didn't bother learning it. I wasn't interested. I didn't realize at the time what a great opportunity I had to grow up bilingual, and so I went off, joined the Air Force, and went to college. And it wasn't until college when I realized that. Knowing a second language, especially Spanish in the US, opens up all kinds of opportunities, and it's fun. And I enjoyed studying it there. And so I went and spent a semester in Mexico and got a degree in foreign languages. I took Arabic, Japanese, and French as well. And went on. And after I got out of the Air Force, I found work as a bilingual first grade teacher. And so I was back in the Rio Grande Valley, and I was teaching 7-year-olds whose native language was Spanish how to read and write in Spanish. And
Oh,
I would highly recommend that if you want to learn a second language, teach it to children, because they have no qualms about laughing at you when you make mistakes, and they will mimic you and point out your errors and make you so embarrassed that it really motivates you to get it right. And so I
Right.
got really good at spelling in Spanish, and my Spanish grammar, I would study it so that I could teach it correctly. So the little kids would make fun of me.
But that
And
is actually a great opportunity because you were learning it, like you're reaffirming your foundation in Spanish because 7, 8 years old
that's
is
right.
the time when.
That was about the level I was at. And so we were learning together lots of basics. And then I went on from there to teach in the high school level. And again, it was native speakers in the Rio Grande Valley. And so their Spanish was excellent. And again, teenagers will laugh at an adult who messes up their native language. And so that forced me to learn fast. And ever since then, I've been very conscious of speaking my very best Spanish around native speakers because I don't want to make dumb mistakes. But the high school that I was going to had grant money to send Spanish teachers back to college to get a master's degree in Spanish. And so I took advantage of that, and that paid for my master's. And from there, I was able to go on and teach Spanish at the college level and work
Wow.
as an interpreter through a couple different agencies, including Language Line Services, which is now Language Line Solutions, which is a big international provider of remote interpretation. And Language Line was an interesting experience for me, mostly because the people would be calling in from all over the Spanish-speaking world, all 23 countries where there are large Spanish-speaking communities, or it's the official language. And so I would have to learn to understand the Argentine accent and the Cuban accent, and people from Barcelona and all these different dialects understand it first, and then it got to be a game trying to guess where the caller was from by their word choices and the way they spoke. And it was sort of like traveling the world from the comfort of my own home, talking to all
That
these
is
people.
awesome.
And so after that, I moved to the Middle East and taught English over there and worked on my Arabic some more. And while I was there, planning to move back is when in about 2009, when I decided I wanted to try court interpreting. And so I had a good foundation in general interpretation, what we'd call community interpreting or commercial interpretation, with a lot of medical in there. And the company that I worked for had trained me and certified me internally for medical interpreting and legal interpreting. Um, but I was able to self-study. Actually, I learned court interpreting in an Arabic country through self-study materials, and then I came back and tested in 2010. And so for the past 10 years, I've been doing mostly court interpreting and legal translation.
Wow, that is quite a resume right there. So you learned all these languages while you were in Mexico.
No, I just learned Spanish while I was in Mexico, and the other languages were in the US and the Middle East.
Okay.
And two
And
years ago, I started studying Russian. So I'm taking Russian 3 right now in the community college. That's my latest
look
hobby.
at that. So then you have Japanese, Arabic, Spanish, and now Russian.
Yes,
Wow, that is impressive.
I've
Very,
forgotten all the Japanese.
I'm sure. I mean, I forgot my French. I haven't spoken in French for quite a while, so that's a shame. But um, I noticed that you are an American Translators Association certified Spanish English translator. So you only do that combination?
For translation,
Yeah.
my only certification is from Spanish, my second strongest language, into English, my native language.
Okay.
And I also, when that certification isn't required, and it rarely is required, I also translate certain documents from French and Portuguese into English, but without any kind of official credential.
Got it. Got it. I understand.
And the
Um,
reason that the direction is important is because the American Translators Association, which is the only credentialing association or organization for translators in the United States, all of their exams are in a certain language pair and direction. So some people will take the English to Spanish test, other people take the Spanish English test, and a very small group of magical unicorns takes both the Spanish English and the English to Spanish. And I've met, I think, 2 of these people in my life. and can go in both directions because they are so bilingual in both languages. But I'm sure that if I took the English into Spanish test, I wouldn't pass it because I don't have the same native feel for Spanish that I do for English.
That's kind of where my question was coming from, because I would like you to explain us from your perspective, why is it important to have that combination, either Spanish to English or English into Spanish?
Well, when I speak Spanish, people understand everything I say, um, but they can tell that it's not my native language. Sometimes I'll use the wrong preposition, or I'll use a figure of speech in a strange way, or I'll forget which gender I'm talking about just because my brain wasn't programmed from an early age to think of the gender of nouns and adjectives. And so they'll ask me, where did you learn Spanish? They won't say, what Spanish speaking country were you born in? They'll say, where did you learn Spanish? And that's the clue that you don't sound like a native. And so if I'm interpreting, that's fine.
Yeah.
I can still communicate just fine. People don't mind a foreign accent and a little bit of a foreign feel to your language, whichever language you speak. But if I'm writing for an audience that wants it to sound perfect, I will write in English. If I'm writing in Spanish, in certain situations, I'll translate into Spanish, like if it's a volunteer translation and their standards are flexible, I might translate into Spanish, but then I give it to a native Spanish speaker to proofread
To
for me,
proofread it, right?
because I want to make sure that all of the prepositions are the natural one for that situation, and that it flows, and that my word choices make sense given the audience. If I'm, my Spanish is mostly Mexican. That's where I've spent most of my life speaking is to Mexican Americans. And so if I'm writing for an audience in Peru or in Spain, I'll make sure that somebody from one of those countries proofreads my translation afterwards and just smooths it out and makes sure that it sounds natural for that audience.
Because it is just as important, or maybe more, as you just said, to have it in a written document or book or piece of paper, um, and really feel like it's a localized type of language, whether it is Spanish. I don't know too much about Arabian languages or Arabic. But I'm assuming it might be the same case, right? There might be accents from here and there, and maybe certain slangs that we also have. So that is very, it's something that is worth mentioning for some people that might be interested in taking the exam, the ATA exam. By the way, do you know anything? Are you somehow, do you know people in ATA? No,
Yes,
yes.
the exam is given every summer here in Austin, and I'm one of the proctors who's going to be working with that in, I think it's July 16th this year. No, July 18th. We're hosting an ATA exam here. So if you're interested in getting that certification, it's a difficult exam. Most people who take it don't pass it, and some people have to take it several times. I think I took the practice test twice and failed, and then I passed it on the third try, and I took the real test once and failed, and then I passed it on the second try, or it was 2 and 3 or 3 and 2, I forget, but I took it many times after I had a master's degree in Spanish and after I've
Right.
been translating for many years before I passed it. So it's not the entry level exam to become a translator. It's way on down the path into your career. Most translators don't have the ATA certification. Most translators in the US don't have any certification at all.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But once you get it, it does open up certain career doors that were closed before.
Of course, yes. That is, so it is still going for the July 18th date. It hasn't, the pandemic hasn't stopped that date at least.
Well, up until last week, we were trying to decide, but finally we decided that as long as it's a big room with people spread far apart and we limit it to a smaller group than before, we'll go ahead and offer the exam at the regular price. And the ATA is the national organization that creates it, but then local associations like here in Austin, the AATIA, and in Houston, HITIA, and each of the major cities in Texas has some translation and interpreting organization that sometimes hosts the test. I don't know this year if anyone outside of Austin is giving it or not. I mean,
Okay.
in other states they are, but in Texas, Austin's the only one I know of right now.
Huh. Interesting. That's very good to know in case anyone is interested in taking the exam this year. So you have been the president of the Austin Area Translators and Interpreters Association, as we were just talking about. What does that entail?
Well, I'm glad you asked. It's an association that has 143 members right now. It was founded in 1985, and there are many languages represented. I haven't counted lately, but last time I looked, it was something like 30 different languages in which our members work. Spanish is the largest one. We have a good mix of translators and interpreters, and then some people who both translate and interpret. And 6 times a year, we meet in person, well, up through March when we started meeting on Zoom. But these in-person meetings are free and open to the public, and sometimes people will drive in from Houston or San Antonio, but it's mostly people in the Austin area who attend. And starting last year, we began videotaping all the sessions and putting them on our website so that members who aren't able to be there in person or who live far away can still watch the presentation. And the presentations are of topics of interest to a variety of members. We try to have something for interpreters and something for translators at every session. And it's never in a foreign language, it's always in English, so that no matter what your working languages are, you can attend and learn from it. And we try to cycle through different topics, have some legal stuff, some medical stuff, some commercial stuff, some staff translator content and some freelancer content, and look at linguistic issues and look at business management issues and financial issues that translators and interpreters face. And so it's a place to learn more about your profession, and it's a place to connect with your peers. A lot of us work out of the home, or we work for a company, but we're the only one doing translation and interpreting at the company. So it's an isolated kind of profession. We're not surrounded by our peers on a regular basis. And joining an association like ATIA is a good place to just mingle socially with other people, kind of like you. I mean, we all come from this from different directions, but other people who love languages and who want to use their language skills to make the world a better place. And so I've met some great friends and some great mentors through ATIA and the other associations.
Yeah, as associations in general for interpreters and translators, my experience has been wonderful so far. But I am glad to hear that you guys are still keeping up with the meetings, even though this, pandemic happened. Um, Encouraging words to HITA for stepping up and putting the social events back up, because it is a great chance that every professional in this field has to develop, to learn so much more about current issues really that are happening, and as you say, anything that you can encounter in the area. So what were you told us about your position. Were you in charge of anything in particular there as the president? Were you in charge of putting all these events together and then someone else organizes it? It's like a very well established organization, right?
Yes, when I joined, I probably joined in about 2006 and was a member for a while, just a general member, absorbing and learning and trying to establish my own career. And then I was elected several years ago to be the communications director. And the board has a communications director, a secretary, a professional development director, the president, and membership director. And so each one of the 6 board members focuses on a different area of the work at running the organization. And so as the communications director, that was just in 2000, well, that's probably 2008. That was when social media was picking up and becoming an important part of how people communicated. And so we started our Facebook page there and a LinkedIn page and a Twitter account and started kind of tinkering around with those. And a lot of interpreters and translators aren't into social media. I find that a lot of us are sort of introverts who
Hermits, yeah.
don't want to throw themselves out there to the world and talk about what they had for breakfast every day and what they're wearing. And but it's still a good way to connect with the ones who do like social media. And so I served for a while on the board in that capacity, and then a couple of years ago was asked to run for president. And we had it was a great association already. We had a real strong website where all the members are listed, where we can put up our profiles, and the general public who needs a translator and interpreter can find us, and it drives business towards the membership. And we had a strong tradition of training and conferences and events and hosting certification exams and so forth. And so I was kind of scared of stepping in. I really respected some of the past presidents. I learned a lot from them. But we got another good board together and just decided we would do our best and see what happened. And
Yeah.
so some of the focuses that we've had in the last year and a half that I've been on the board are continuing on past successes and building on them, but also uh, increasing our online content, like videoing all of our presentations and putting those onto the website so that members could watch them. And people who join can go back to the library now and watch past presentations from before they joined the association. We've also tried to survey our members at the end of each year and ask them what's interesting to you, what's useful, what meetings would be valuable enough to you to invest a Saturday afternoon and come out and hang out with us. Do you want to talk more about like the practical side of running your own business, or do you want to talk about where to find the clients, or do you want to talk about how to build up your skills, how to learn new technology tools like computer assisted translation? And so we use those surveys to plan our coming year's presentations. And then at the beginning of each year, we publish a calendar showing for 6 meetings this year, we're going to have these 12 sessions. And that way people can plan ahead and figure out, do I want to come to this one, and this one doesn't really apply to me. And then each week we send out a newsletter reminding them about what's coming up, just because when I was a member before I got on the board, I would forget about meetings and I would overlook the email. It's easy to miss an email. It's still all the time I miss emails and have to go back and searching for them. When somebody emails me and says, hey, did you get that email I sent last week? I'm like, hold on, let me look. And then I dig it up. So if we can send out an email and a reminder email and put it on Facebook and put it on other social media, there's a better chance that people will be aware of it and actually come out. And so that's one area we've made progress in the last year and a half, is just connecting better with more people. And then also a big project for us right now is a mentorship program. We put out a call a few months ago asking which of the newer members, people who are just getting into this profession, would like to have a mentor from some of the not older, but the more experienced members. And so we got, I think, 6 or 7 people asking for a mentor, and we looked at their profile, we looked at the questions they were asking and matched them up with a more experienced member. And not everybody wants to be a mentor, even if they have good qualifications. Maybe they're in the middle of tough times and can't put one more thing on their plate. But we've been able to find so far mentors for most of them who are working in the same language and the same profession, meaning either a translator or an interpreter, or ideally, if it's both, and somebody who's done both, who can just meet once a month virtually now
That's
with their
awesome.
mentee and discuss real practical, focused solutions to the problems they're facing. Things as simple as, can you look at my resume and tell me, would you hire somebody like me with this resume, or how can we improve it? Or do you know anybody who's looking for a beginner with these language skills? How can I present myself in a way that will impress a potential client and give them confidence to hire me and give me a chance? So the mentorship program is our big project for 2020. And ask me again at the end of the year, and I'll tell you how it went.
Oh, I definitely will, because I love those projects. The mentorship programs here started here in this association, over there, and where in any profession and wherever it is, it's one of the programs I think that teaches the most, because then if you are able to meet, like you say, once a month, or maybe even if the pandemic wasn't happening, shadowing them, you can learn so much from their experience in the place, right, in situ. um, this is my last question regarding Atia, which is, from your position, do you think we need, what do you think we need to improve as professionals, and what have we solidified? And this question really is coming from my perspective, I see that in Texas we have a lot of court interpreters and medical interpreters, and I think that we are very solid on those areas. I don't know what's your take on that. I don't know if conference interpreting you think is as big as court and medical or commercial even. I mean, we have a lot of industries that need interpreters, almost any nowadays, right? So that's kind of where my question was coming from.
That's a good question. I would say the biggest challenge that I've seen facing Texas translators and interpreters is how to find clients, how to promote themselves. Most of us are freelancers or looking for a job, and so how to find a full-time job would be in the same category. But we tend to be really good at our language and really good people, good-hearted and fun to work with and nice and all. But most of us don't know how to present ourselves in a way that builds credibility with clients. We inadvertently second guess ourselves, say things like, oh, I'm not sure if I can do that. I've never done that before. And sabotage our own efforts to come across as professionals. And so I think I spend most of my time trying to help other translators and interpreters get a handle on the marketing. That's what I do for the company where I work now, is all the marketing. So I'm in a very marketing frame of mind, how to present yourself as a professional in a way that business people understand, because most of our clients are monolingual English speakers. They don't even know what we're saying in our second language, so they're not judging us by our Spanish or whatever. They're judging us by how professional we act when we speak to them or write to them in English.
Perfect. I love that. The branding. Yes. Focus on that because it's very important. And I think it's going to be a big deal coming up in this new next years. So let's now talk about what you are doing at University of Texas. You are running a program or teaching a program. Tell us about it, please.
Sure. Let me tell you how this came about.
Yes, please.
How far back to go? I'm telling you, these are long, winding roads we travel. um, I was driving through Austin a few years ago and I heard an ad on the radio. I was listening to a Spanish station here called Radio Mujer, which is call-in talk shows in Spanish. And I like to listen to it because I get to hear lots of colloquial Spanish that's unscripted, just people chatting on the radio, kind of like this podcast, but in Spanish. And they came on with an ad for the University of Texas medical interpreting program, which I had never heard of before. I didn't know we had one here, and it turned out to be new, and that's why they were buying airtime on the radio to announce it. And so I called the number and I said, "Hey, great UT, thank you for hosting a medical interpreting program for Spanish speakers. We really need it. I wish we had more. I want to help if there's anyone that I can introduce you to, or any way that I can promote it through ATIA or one of these other associations or through my Facebook page. I want to steer more students towards the program." And so I just was in communication with them off and on through that. And I wasn't doing medical interpreting, so I wasn't taking or teaching that course. But I met people there that a couple of years later contacted me again and said, our instructor is gone. Would you like to teach the medical interpreting course? And I said, that's really not my thing. I'm not certified as a medical interpreter. I've done some, but I think you should find somebody who's better at it than me. But you should teach a legal interpreting course. That's what we need. And that's been my focus. And they said, okay, you want to teach a legal interpreting course? And I said, no, not really. I know other people who are better at it than me. And I gave them a list of names. And they contacted some of them and we went back and forth. And after a while, they found another court interpreter in Sugar Land, where you are, Sandra DeJu, and hired her to write the curriculum and to start teaching the course out there. And they said, we'd like you to teach the Austin section of that. And so one thing led to another. And last summer, a year ago, we started teaching what was called the Court Interpreter Boot Camp. And it was a 40-hour course that met for a week. And I think we had 18 students the first time using Sandra's materials. And we covered pretty much for people who have interpreted and who are strong bilinguals but don't know about the court system, we got them ready for interpreting in a legal setting and for taking the licensing exam here in Texas. We don't call it a court certification, we call it court licensure just because of the way the statute is written, but it's what other states call a certification. And some of those people have, I know, we haven't surveyed them and I haven't followed up, but I can think of one from last summer who has now passed the certification exam and is working as a court interpreter.
Wow.
We
Wow.
hired her through my company and sent her out on interpreting assignments. And then we did it again in the fall and in the spring, and partway through the spring semester, we had to convert to Zoom instruction. But it was well received. We had plenty of people for each section of the class, and we had people driving all the way from Dallas and Tyler, Texas, and San Angelo to Austin, which is like up to a 6-hour round trip drive just to take this class because they really wanted to get the training so they could pass the exam so they could work as court interpreters, because it's a cool job, it's interesting, and it's very in demand.
It pays well.
Yeah, it pays. Most court interpreters average about $90 an hour. I mean, who doesn't want to work at a job where you get paid $90 an hour?
Exactly.
And it's not 40 hours a week. It's, a session here and a session there. But when you're working, it pays well. And when you're not working, you can be looking for your next assignment or studying or traveling between assignments. And so I could go on and on about this course, but I've already forgotten what your question was. Did I answer your question, Pamela?
Yes, you did.
Okay.
But I was going to ask you how long does it take, the course in total?
The course, if you take it as a summer boot camp, it was 1 week, but normally it's taught over 10 weeks during the semester. And over the summer, it's going to be this time a 6-week course. And again, it's scheduled to take 40 hours in all, including 30 hours interactive over Zoom and 10 hours of readings in preparation for the lecture. And this summer we're starting next week, I believe. It's June 23rd through July 30th, and it's going to be on Tuesday and Thursday evenings from 6 to 8:30 p.m.
Oh wow! So you're ready to go. Do you have a lot of students sign up for it?
Last I heard, there were, I think, 10 students signed up, so there's still some availability.
Perfect.
And it's not just Spanish. We've also had speakers of French and Vietnamese and Farsi, I believe.
Awesome.
So we have the materials translated into the languages of the students who take the course, so that even if there's a lot of Spanish questions that come up from the students because they know I speak Spanish, and most of them speak Spanish, but we have set it up so that you don't need to know Spanish to take the course, and you can still practice with the foreign language content.
Do you need to have any prerequisites to enroll in the course, or just right out of high school?
You don't even have to have a high school diploma. Everybody who's taken it that I know of has a college degree. Mm-hmm. And so it's recommended that you have a college degree in something, and you have to be able to demonstrate a certain level of fluency, because people who sign up and they've just taken college Spanish for a couple of years, it's going to be too difficult for them. And so UT has a list of ways that you can demonstrate that you're bilingual. Like if you got your education in a foreign country and now you live in the US, or if you've taken X number of hours in a foreign language, or if you have one of these credentials that show your fluency, that's the requirement. But you don't have to have any kind of certification or degree in interpreting. So we have beginning interpreters, but I really recommend it for people who have worked in interpretation before. If you've been a medical interpreter or a school interpreter, or even if at your church you volunteer as an interpreter, you have to have done a lot of interpreting to get to the level where you could attempt the legal interpreting exam, because it's pretty advanced.
Yep. Yeah. I imagine it is. I wanted to know about I guess the courses that you teach in the program. Is there anything specific regarding linguistics. This is for legal, so I'm assuming you have a bunch of legal terminology, but also do you have any specifics for, let's say, forensics or other types of legal interpreting?
At UT, our program is pretty much to get you ready to take the Texas oral exam.
Okay.
You have to pass a written exam and an oral exam to be licensed to interpret in Texas courts. And it's a set of exams that are shared by 41 other states. It's developed by a national organization. And so it's a test that isn't unique to Texas. But when you take our class, we're also thinking if you pass the test, then you'll be working in Texas courts. So you have to be familiar with the way the law works in Texas. So it's mostly about the national exam, but then we also talk about the different levels of the court system here in Texas, from municipal and justice of the peace through district, through county, different kinds of county courts, and then district courts, and then the higher courts of appeals. And so over the course of our 40 hours, we'll talk about all the different levels of courts and what kind of cases are heard in each court. You know, if you get a traffic ticket or your dog wasn't on a leash, you go to a certain kind of court and have a certain kind of hearing. If you are a burglar or a drunk driver or domestic violence perpetrator, you'll go into a different kind of court. If you commit a federal crime, then you go to a federal court, which is outside of the purview of our training. But we talk about those different levels of the Texas legal system, and then we talk about the three kinds of interpreting that are tested on the exam, the three modes of interpretation, which most of our listeners have probably heard of,
Yes.
Which are consecutive and simultaneous interpreting and sight translation. And to pass the exam in Texas, you have to be able to demonstrate with at least a 60% accuracy that you can do a sight translation from your first language to your second and from your second back to your first, a simultaneous section from English into your foreign language, and then a consecutive session from one language to another and then back and forth again, like maybe simulating an attorney asking a witness on the witness stand questions in trial. And so if you can do all of those at least a 60% level of accuracy, which is embarrassingly low, really, because who would want to be in court and only get 60% of their evidence presented correctly? But that's the standard for the basic level of licensure. And then if you get a basic license, you can go back and test again for the master license, which means at least at a 70% level of accuracy on each of those three modes, you're able to interpret and keep up with the recorded sessions and demonstrate acceptable accuracy in your rendering. And then you can get the master license. And with the master license, you can interpret at any Texas court in any type of case, in any city, in any county, in any venue.
So
And
that is the minimum for that? Go ahead, sorry.
There are about 3,000 courts in Texas, and so it's a big market.
Yeah, but the minimum for that you said was 70%, not 80. I thought it was 80.
No.
Okay.
70.
Okay. For the simultaneous and the consecutive, do you do a lot of practices right there in the program?
Yes, we have scripts, which Sandra Deju wrote, which simulate different types of hearing. There's a divorce case, there's a deposition for an auto accident, there's an interview with an alleged child abuser. There's different types of scenarios like that where you break off into, in this case, breakout rooms in Zoom with another student or a couple students, and you role play. One person might be the attorney, one person the defendant, another person the judge, and you read from your script, and the person who's playing the role of the interpreter has to, without looking, interpret back and forth between the speakers if it's consecutive, or just interpret what the person's saying if it's simultaneous. We have different sessions that are recorded, so during different nights of the class, you may be working with the partner, or you may be listening to a recording of somebody speaking and talking into your voice recorder and going back and evaluating it afterwards, and then trying to improve your accuracy and your speed over time. And we try to start with the more basic stuff, the lower level, less stressful types of hearings that you might run into in municipal court. And then we work our way up to the more serious crimes. We start with slower speakers and then work up to faster speakers, shorter sessions going up to longer sessions, simpler language going up to more complex language. For example, site translation early in the course might be a handwritten affidavit where somebody is describing the crime they were the victim of, and it's using real simple language, probably with some poor handwriting and some poor spelling. And you look at that and you have to read it aloud into the other language as if it were written in the other language. While a more complex and advanced exercise would be a judge speaking to an attorney or speaking to the jury, quoting sections of the statute about what they have to do as members of the jury. And those sentences tend to be much longer and more complex. And so we would take those slower and break them down and look up words in advance and make a little mini glossary to cover that session, and then do it sentence by sentence, and then try to go back and do it all together again to build up stamina and confidence and vocabulary and all the skills that go into this very complex activity.
Yes, that is great. This is a personal question that I have from me. I mean, not personal to you. How fast do you guys go usually? Because I was told, and what I've read is 180, but I know I've interpreted 250 words a minute.
I I haven't timed our materials, but they are the ones that are recorded are going at about this speed right here. And I think I'm talking at about 120 words a minute. Between 120 and 150 is usually what I speak at. And if I recall right, the national exam goes up. I'm not good with numbers. It's no faster than 150 words a minute. So it's not as fast as real life,
Right.
but it's much faster than most people are comfortable interpreting it.
Yes.
My favorite interpretation is always in rural Texas courts where you've got a judge who's in no hurry at all and talks about this fast. And it's a joy to interpret for those judges. But the recordings are, by somebody in New York City who speaks at 150 words
You're
a
like,
minute. You
ah.
have to be ready for that.
Right. That's very funny. Okay, so we are going to leave all the information for the UT program in Austin. And if you feel like you want to share also the one that I don't know if Sandra, honestly, I didn't keep in touch with her or anything. I don't know if the program is still going on here in Sugarland.
It's not meeting this term
Uh-huh.
because we're all online. They've grouped it all together into one section.
Got it.
So
Okay.
hopefully on down the line when restrictions are relaxed, it'll be meeting there again in person. I prefer to meet in person. I feel like there's a better connection when you're face to face. I enjoy it more, and I feel like the students, it's easier to pay attention and stay engaged for a 2.5 hour class when you're sitting face to face and interacting with people. But the advantage of doing it online is, one, you can be anywhere in the state right now. You don't have to drive to Austin. And two, a lot of our actual work is online. And so the interpreting that we're practicing over Zoom is exactly what we're being called on to do by the law firms and the courts these days. So it's
So
realistic training.
this just occurred to me. What if someone from abroad wants to take your course?
I believe that it's open to anybody in the world. It's focused on the Texas market, but
Right.
because it's an exam that's shared with most other states, almost everything that we do would be pertinent to people in other states and even people from abroad who are thinking of moving to the U.S. or working in this market.
Yeah, yeah, and you can still learn a lot of legalese. So yeah, I think that if somebody is interested, um, let's talk a little bit about your business, Texan Translation. Tell us, what does it focus on? For how long have you been doing this?
Sure. Texan Translation is a family business. My wife is a general manager. I'm in charge of managing business development manager is my title, and so that's a lot of marketing and exploring new product lines. We founded the company together in 2008, so we've been around for 12 years. And our oldest daughters, the ones who are in college, are actually freelance translators who do a little bit of the translation for us, English into Spanish. but we have about 80 contractors that we work through. The office staff is composed of 5 employees, but then we have maybe 80 contractors. We do mostly translation of documents, especially legal documents. That's our niche, but we are expanding now into more interpreting. I've been the only staff interpreter for a while, but this year we've started hiring other contracted interpreters, and we are slowly building up that segment. And so let me try to summarize. Most of our orders are in Spanish, and a lot of them are for law firms. What we'd like to do is get a law firm that is filing a case here in Texas and has a stack of documents from a foreign country that they need translated into English and certified with a sworn affidavit saying that these are accurate so they can file the foreign language documents in a Texas court. And so that has expanded to the point where we also do people who are buying property in the United States, and they have to file their documents with the bank, and they have to be able to demonstrate that, back in Colombia, they own this condominium, and so they are a good risk for the bank to loan money to. Or we have courts in Texas and New Mexico and California right now who have a website that they want to make available to a wider audience. They have a lot of foreign language speakers in their community, and so they'll hire us to translate sections of their website into Spanish. We just finished doing a website in California going into Spanish, Tagalog, Russian, simplified Chinese, traditional Chinese, and Portuguese. And so if there's a community that speaks these foreign languages that can't afford an attorney and needs to go to court pro se, then all the instructions are available for now, and the forms they can fill out and submit to the court, and then somebody there can process it using a bilingual format and give access to the legal system for these people. So that's mostly what we do, legal translation, but then sometimes people will send us their transcripts because they want to get into college here, or they were married in Spain, but they're getting divorced here, and so they have to have the paperwork to send back and forth. And so we do a lot of legal documents for individuals as well.
Got it. Yeah, and you focus a lot on the legal because that's what you've been doing for a number of years now. So that's very, very interesting. Your children are working with you. And this is, you said, your daughter, who is a freelance translator, and who is the other child?
Well, I've got twin 19-year-old daughters who are going to college, and so they don't have much time. But when they're home during the summer and stuff, there are certain kinds of translations that we send to them that they're comfortable with. All their lives, I've only spoken to them Spanish at home ever since before they were born. And then they went on to bilingual programs in the public schools, and they've worked in the restaurant business in a bilingual capacity. They're the one person in the restaurant who speaks Spanish, and they'll get called on to speak to the Spanish-speaking customers and that kind of thing.
So your wife is the, I guess, the manager as well. Is she native speaker?
She's from Brownsville as well, and she actually learned Spanish before I did. She does some Spanish translation, Spanish into English, and deals with Spanish-speaking customers sometimes.
But you're the only one that has been doing this in the Texas courts so far. Right. That's pretty cool. That's very, very nice.
Of the employees, we have other contractors who are court certified, court licensed.
Right. That is very interesting. I love that all your kids speak so many languages. How did Portuguese came about? I don't remember you mentioning that.
Every year I make a New Year's resolution to study a new language. And so 3 years ago it was Portuguese. And I just spent all the year, like for an hour a day, I just studied Portuguese and took lessons and listened to audiobooks in Portuguese. And I had already studied Spanish, Italian, and French at that point, and so that gives you a big jump on Portuguese.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
once you figure out the accent and some of the differences in spelling, you can understand written Portuguese just fine.
Yeah.
Communicating in spoken Portuguese is still a big challenge, but it was fun. And I would encourage anybody who's listening who's bilingual and comfortable with their two languages to add a third language, because it sort of wakes up your brain and it'll keep you mentally alert longer and mentally healthy. And they say that people who are multilingual become senile and suffer from other age-related diseases later in life because we have to use more parts of our brain more actively.
Yeah. Yeah. That is totally true. Something that might scare people away are the age. Like, when do you start? You know, a lot of them say you have to start young, you have to start as a kid. I don't agree with that because I learned French when I was 17, and I learned it so well that if I start speaking French with someone again, it's probably going to take me a couple of weeks to pick it up again, but I can talk it. I can speak it again in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But so your children, I guess they learn it when they were younger. What about you? If you're learning one language each day, the age isn't a limit, right? It shouldn't matter.
No, I'm what is this,
You don't have to tell
2020?
us your age.
But I'm 47 and I started learning Russian last year and I'm making good
Yeah.
progress. It's a hard language, but I can have conversations now with strangers in Russian.
And then you learn Arabic as well, which is just like Russian, a whole different alphabet. I don't even know if it's called an alphabet, but it is okay. But yeah, I mean, you have to learn all this other system, and I think you don't read in the same way, or is that just Chinese?
Well, you read from right to left in Arabic,
From
but
right to left.
yeah.
Okay, that's the opposite way.
But I don't think you ever get too old to learn a language. The problem is that kids have more free time than we do. And so kids can spend all day long talking to people, asking questions, and reading books. And as adults, we can only dedicate like half an hour a day with
Yeah.
all of our other demands. And so if we had as much free time as them and as much curiosity and enthusiasm, we could learn almost as fast as little kids. They have a little bit of a cognitive advantage over us, but it's nowhere near as big as people make it out to be.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if you really put your mind to it, just do it. And it's going to be beneficial because if you already have all this knowledge about how to translate, for instance, and you want to go ahead and take, like you did, a master in Spanish or so, maybe some years from now, you can take a certification in XY language and also make some money out of there. Um, would you share two things that should be the start point for any interpreter and translator who is already certified and licensed to start their own business?
Okay, I would be happy to, and I would add that if you aren't certified or licensed, that's okay. You can still start your own business. Most of us aren't certified or licensed, but this applies either way.
Mhm.
These are my two simple, free, quick tips that will instantly set you apart from almost all the competition. And
Okay.
I don't think you're gonna. This is gonna be a surprise, I think. The first is your email address. Get a good email address. A lot of people who email me asking for translation interpretation work have a weird email address with numbers in it. You don't want any numbers in your email address. Numbers in your email address tell me that you tried to put in your name and Gmail told you, sorry, that's already taken. Why don't you tack this random number at the end? And you're like, okay, I'll accept it even though that
Sure.
number means nothing to me. Or else you put your year of birth in there or something. So get rid of numbers.
Mhm.
If you have a long, complicated name that's hard for Americans who only speak English to pronounce, simplify it, put in a nickname or put in something like Houston Translator at gmail.com, words that are easy for people who only speak American English to say. And I'm assuming that most of the listeners are working in the American market here. If you're in another country, then adapt my comments. But get a professional looking email address that has no numbers in it, and no offense, but it should not end in AOL, Hotmail, or Yahoo. AOL, Hotmail, and Yahoo are all great domains back in the 90s, but it tells your potential client that you have not updated your technological skills for the last 30 years. And that will scare them away if they're working in any kind of a high-tech segment. So a Gmail account is fine to get started, but when you can, after a year or two, it's even better to have your own domain, your own website, so that you're, like mine is marco.hanson@texantranslation.com. That shows that I do this full-time and I'm serious about my job, and so I have a professional-looking email address. Tip number one, get a good email address. And number two, every time you contact a potential client, whether it's an interpreting agency, a translation agency, a job opportunity, or somebody who you think might need a translator, remember that you're auditioning. Think of an actor who's going to an audition. The very first email that you send, they're going to judge you. People judge strangers. We have to judge, because if you're coming to me for work, I have to decide, is it worth my time to pursue this? Or can I tell at first glance, you don't know what you're doing? And so most of the emails we get here at our company from freelance translators and interpreters are full of typos. And if it's somebody whose second language is English, as at a personal level, I'm like, well, that's fine. I understand that your English isn't great. I'm going to forgive you. We can still be friends, but I'm not going to hire you, because you know that this is a company based in the United States that's in the language business, and you're in the language business. And as a language professional, I want to see your very best language. So here's a tip. If you're going to contact an American company in English offering your services as a language professional, do not send that first email or that resume until somebody else has proofread it. Go to somebody who's like an English teacher who grew up in the US, who only speaks English, and say, hey, buddy, can you look over this and correct it? Some people love correcting other people's emails. So, just mark it with red all over, and that's okay. They're your friend. They're helping you out. They'll polish it up, make it look good, find all your mistakes, and then you send that off, and you can feel confident that you're coming across as a language professional. And the agency or the whoever's hiring or the contractor will feel confident that they don't know if your Spanish is good or not. They assume if you're from a Spanish-speaking country, well, your Spanish must be good, or whatever your other language is. They don't care. They're not going to ask you anything in Spanish. They want your English to be good. And so make sure that you send your very best English, and don't approach them like by text messages or Facebook chat or something. We just delete those, because no professional is going to contact me by Facebook chat asking for a job. Contact by email, send a resume, and make it perfect English with no mistakes. And you're going to get a response, and you're going to get hired if you do that, because nobody does it. Really, nobody bothers to do that. Those are my two tips, and they're both related.
Great tips. I really like them. So Marco, just one last question about your business then. Do you have any type of office that dedicates to professional development, like business development? Can interpreters or translators come to you and say, hey, look, I want to step up my marketing strategies. Can you help me with that?
Well, at my company, that's what I do most of the time is business development, search engine optimization, creating content online to drive potential clients towards our company. And so if you have questions, I'd be happy to answer. But I think even better than coming to me would be going to one of the associations, HITA if you're in Houston, or ATIA if you're here in Austin, or TAJIT, which is statewide for court interpreters, or TAJIT, which is statewide for healthcare interpreters. There are associations in El Paso and San Antonio and the Dallas-Fort Worth area as well. And those associations are where you can get the most training, or at the national level, an association like the ATA or NAJIT, NAJIT. Find an association, connect with them, and you'll get lots of good training on how to market yourself.
Yep. Okay, perfect. If people want to contact you or your company, where can they do that? How can they do that? And of course, we're going to leave all that information posted on next to this video, but let us know, please, Marco. Go ahead.
Sure. The best way to get a hold of us is our general inbox, which is info@texantranslation.com, not Texas, texantranslation.com. And that's an inbox that we all review. So if it applies to me, I'll answer it. If it applies to somebody else, then then they can answer it. People can send their resumes in there if they're interested in working for us as translators or interpreters. We prefer to hire within Texas whenever possible because Texan Translation, that's what we're all about. We want to make a difference here in our home state. We're all from Texas or live in Texas now amongst the employees. And so that's how you can contact us. Our website is texantranslation.com. Or if you are interested in the legal side, I would encourage you to connect with us on Facebook at Become a Texas Court Interpreter. It's like facebook.com/Become a Texas Court Interpreter, I think.
If you just look it up, like Become a Texas Court Interpreter, you'll find it. And it's a very helpful website. There are a lot of resources there. I was just going through it today, and many more people, many more interpreters have uploaded bunch of different, webinars, I guess now, not seminars anymore.
Yeah.
It has been a pleasure, Marco. Thank you so much for taking the time of speaking to all of us, talking to all of us about your company and your experience. I really appreciate it. And I am going to post all the information about the UT program as well. Good luck with that.
Okay, my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. It's been fun chatting with you, and I hope it's helpful for somebody out there.
Yes. Take care, everyone. Thank you for watching, and don't
Thanks.
miss the episode on Thursday. We'll be posting the thumbnail very soon. Take care. Bye.